As a matter of fact, the very fact that I cannot tell you how many nuclear weapons exist in the world underscores a problem. There's no transparency in these programs. We don't know how many nuclear weapons exist because those numbers are not made public. That's another symptom of a problem that has to be addressed. So right now, here we are in 2009. I don't really, in disagreement with Ambassador Kamal, I don't really see this cascade of new states that are just dying to get nuclear weapons. We have several countries that have indicated an interest in acquiring various nuclear weapon capabilities. There are concerns about Iran, for example, because Iran has been not in compliance with its safeguards agreement with the IAEA, and it is also not complying with Security Council resolutions calling upon it to cease certain fuel cycle activities that are going on in its country. The North Koreans have tested a nuclear device this year, and it's second in recent years. That's another great concern of the world community. India, Pakistan are both developing nuclear weapons and missiles, and competitively right now, and that is another issue that needs to be dealt with. There's the continual problem in the Middle East with the failure to address the Israeli nuclear weapon issue and the lack of any progress whatsoever on establishing a Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone. I'd like to remind you that when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty became indefinitely extended in 1995, one of the preconditions for that extension to be agreed upon was establishing a Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone. And nothing has been done to do that. And as a result, this is an issue of great dissatisfaction among many of the states. So here, I've just gone through some of the issues that are on the table right now. What is most missing, there's a lot of rhetoric about the importance of disarmament as a goal. There is vast disagreements among states over how to achieve that goal. Many of the nuclear weapon states have been listing a number of preconditions that must first be met before disarmament can be achieved. This includes non-proliferation, counterterrorism, agreements to resolve regional conflicts, world peace, the creation of a functioning collective security system worldwide. And all of these combined together effectively postpone the achievement of disarmament indefinitely and makes the issue a debate rather over the preconditions. Then there's another group of states that say, no, it doesn't work that way. The progress in disarmament helps in building peace. And it's this constant interaction between disarmament and peace, which is at dispute now among many of the nation states. So I predict that in the future we're going to see incremental progress of lower numbers of nuclear weapons, possibly the withdrawal of nuclear weapons of the United States from West Europe, agreement possibly on entry into force of a comprehensive test ban treaty, probably in my guess is between 5 and 10 years, depending on what happens in the U.S. Congress. There might be progress in negotiating a treaty eventually on limiting the production of nuclear materials for use in nuclear weapons, but that's a longer-term issue with facing great difficulties now in negotiations because of disputes over the scope of that. We have enormous hard work ahead of us in this field. I'm not harboring any illusions that nuclear disarmament will be achieved anytime soon, but I do hold hope that enormous progress is possible if the following conditions are met. First, I think that the initiatives that are proposed in disarmament absolutely must solve 4 criteria. They must be irreversible, they must be transparent, that is, in making information public, they must be verifiable in terms of reassuring states that other countries are complying, and they must be done in a binding way, that is, pursuant to a non-discriminatory, internationally legally binding commitment. I think that would help enormously. I also think it would be important to move away from this doctrine of nuclear deterrence, which Secretary General Ban Ki-moon described in 24 October last year in his nuclear disarmament proposal. He referred to nuclear disarmament as a contagious doctrine, because now there are 9 states that practice some version of this doctrine of nuclear deterrence. And as long as you have some countries that practice this doctrine of deterrence, you're creating a model for other countries to follow. This is a fundamental truth that's universally acknowledged. And I think it's a very, very serious issue that has to be grappled with. These are just some thoughts, and I know you have lots of questions for us about what the UN is doing in this field and what more needs to be done. So I think this might be a good place for me to stop and open up for questions from you.
No, not before we go to questions.
Okay.
You have to face me. I have 3 points on which I want your views. The first is that everybody is talking about cheaters because it is very sexy to talk of North Korea as a cheater, Iran as a cheater, Iraq as a cheater. But is it not a fact that everybody who could has cheated? Everybody. Starting with the permanent five, the United States, Britain, Russia, France, China. They promised in the Non-Proliferation Treaty that they would, quote unquote, pursue nuclear disarmament in good faith. But they had no intention of doing that, and they cheated against that particular sentence. All of them, each one of them, multiplied their nuclear arsenals between 1970 and 1990. And that, for me, is cheating. And so they are cheaters in chief. Then among the signatories, you had countries like Iraq and North Korea, etc., who were cheating because obviously they felt that if the big ones, the big guys can do it, we should also do it. In fact, the only countries which did not cheat were either those signatories of the Non-Proliferation Treaty who had no capacity, these South Pacific island states who can hardly survive, and therefore their question of cheating does not arise, or India, Pakistan, and Israel, who never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty and therefore cannot be called cheaters at all. And so, in fact, the only honest people in the world are the three countries who did not sign the NPT. And I'd like you to agree or disagree with me on point number one. Point number two, if you have in one fell swoop cancelled the idea of deterrence. But deterrence is important. When countries have a security problem, they are going to answer that security consideration before they fall in love with nuclear disarmament or any other disarmament. In other words, security will always outweigh armaments or disarmament or arms control moves. And so security is the first thing which has to be answered, and security is a question of disputes and of disagreements, etc. And so the United Nations mechanism, instead of following a top-down approach of saying arms limitation, should be following a bottom-up approach of trying to solve disputes and conflicts, and therefore eliminating the causes of armed wars. That's point number two. And point number three is that we live in a world of increasing knowledge. Knowledge in history has always been increasing, particularly scientific knowledge in the current atmosphere of the world when you have modern tools like the internet, etc., etc. And so the knowledge about the nuclear issue and about the use of nuclear materials is going to increase. You cannot stop. You cannot put a hermetic seal around knowledge. And so if you look at the number of countries today who have the capacity for nuclear weapons, you have Sweden, you have got Germany, you've got Japan, you've got a dozen countries who could, at the twist of a half twist of a screwdriver, produce a nuclear weapon if they found that their security needs required it. And out of these, the most dangerous country is not Iran, it is not North Korea, it is Japan. And you know it and I know it, that Japan has got 70 tons of plutonium.